Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. We're past our last frost and normally I'd wait 2 more weeks to harden off our okra. But the temperatures have soared into the 80s and we just had several nights of frost last week. But since we're going to have a week of the 80s, let's go ahead and harden off our okra. Now these okra plants are 10 weeks old. I started them inside because here in north central Maryland, by the time nighttime temperatures are warm enough, if I direct sow, they just won't grow tall enough during the season to get a good harvest. Now last year, my seedlings that I started inside really struggled, so I decided this year to start them really early, in mid-February. Now the squirrels will dig in those pots, so I need to protect them. But they're so tall, the only place I can do that is under these super hoops. These things are 3 feet tall. I also used a heat mat to germinate the seedlings, and they germinated in 3 days. And now I have big trees. Also, I made sure to water with lukewarm water. I've made the mistake in the past using this basement water that comes straight from underground and is ice cold. So warm water's made a huge difference. Now I'm going to wait to open the tunnel until I get all the plants out because the birds will just flock in there. I also decided to start the okra seeds in 4-inch soil blocks. They outgrew those really quickly, so I decided to pot them up 7 weeks ago. They're going to stay outside 2 hours today. They come back in the house, and either they're going to have to go back to the basement, or I've got to get creative about setting up a place for the lights, because obviously they're too tall for those shelves. Every day I'll increase how long they stay outside. But in the morning, I'll look at the temperature and not bring them out if it's below 60 degrees. Okay, let me go collect the rest of them. 3 or 4 are left. Wow, those barely fit. We'll see if the wind's going to knock them over. I can always add a stake. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's time to direct sow your sunflowers. Or if you're like me and started your seeds in the basement under lights, today we're going to plant out the mammoth, the really tall, large-headed sunflowers. They're 10 to 12 feet tall. Now these seedlings have been hardening off for 7 days, and they're 3 weeks old. I started these seeds indoors only 3.5 weeks ago. Sunflowers love the sun, so I've picked the front garden because this is my hottest, sunniest location here on our property. If you want tall, large-headed sunflowers, you also need to space them 18 to 24 inches apart. This Hori knife is 12 inches long. Now, before they're fully open, sunflower heads will follow the sun. They'll start in the east in the morning and they'll travel over to the west. So make sure you plant them where when they're finished fully opening and they set their heads, you can see them. In my back garden, I have 2 fences, an east and a west. And if I plant them along my east fence, once those heads are fully open, they're going to freeze towards that morning sun, and my neighbors will be able to enjoy them, but I only see the backs of them. So pick a location in your garden that once the heads are fully open, you can see them. It tends to be towards east, but here in the front, they tend to get more afternoon sun, so they'll be okay. Now, mammoth sunflowers are really tall, 10 to 12 feet, and they're going to need the support of this trellis. Pollinators will love sunflowers. The bees will just flock and visit them. And squirrels, they'll love the heads. So if you want those seeds for yourself, you're going to have to net them with something. Now water well the first week, every day, until the roots get established. But after that, sunflowers are drought tolerant. They don't require watering. You also don't need to feed them. Now squirrels will dig these up, so I need to protect them with 4 pieces of hardware cloth. And I'll secure it with these landscape pins. Then I'm going to put in this little cage to protect them from me. I'm famous on walking over my plants and cutting off their heads. I also need to protect these from slugs. Hopefully they're big enough that they're not going to decimate them. But I'm going to put the Sluggo down and then cover it with mulch because the birds will just eat it up. They love it. It's organic and it won't hurt animals. Now what am I going to do with all the rest of these? I'm going to give them to my community. It's a tradition here in my alley. People look forward to getting my free sunflowers. Now you notice I use deep mulch. It's because I do a no-dig or a no-till garden method. And that's another reason I like to start my seedlings inside. So they're a nice good size. It's better. That way they don't drown in the mulch. Now, as you know, mammoth only make one head. They don't send out multiple branches, just that one large head. Now, check back later for an update. Good afternoon, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today, it's time to plant out our multi-branching, multi-heading, variety of colors sunflowers called Autumn Beauty. Now these seedlings are 3 weeks old. I've already hardened them off for 7 days. Sunflowers love full sun, so along this fence is going to be just perfect. If you want lots of blooms, pick a sunny and warm location and space them 18 to 24 inches apart. They like lots of room. These are going to be spaced about 6 feet apart, and they will fill up that whole space. If you plant your sunflowers close together, they're going to be small and spindly. 6 feet. Because they have so many branches and so many heads, you don't have to worry about the location of them following the sun. Remember, the mammoth sunflower is going to follow the morning sun towards the west, but once the head is fully open, it's going to set permanently towards that morning sun. But Autumn Beauty has so many flowers, it's not going to matter if you plant it on the east or the west side. Now, if you're wondering what these are, this was for support. Stems started to flop over. Now, speaking of support, these sunflowers are going to need support. This fence will be perfect. I can tie them up later. Autumn Beauty tend to be 5 to 8 feet tall. Bees love sunflowers. I love the variety of colors and the beauty they add to the garden, but the main reason I grow them is to attract the goldfinch. They prefer these tinier seeds over the mammoth, which produce the big seeds. Cardinals will also come and eat them. They tend to eat them off the ground, the ones that have fallen. Now here in front of the garage, I tend to get my largest, most productive sunflower. One year I counted over 100 flowers. Now along this fence we're going to save for the okra. This gets the most sun and it is the warmest location. I think this garage holds in the heat. Now sunflowers don't require feeding. They can find nutrients themselves. They're really good scavengers. So here's an example. Right here near the corner of the garage and the rain barrels, there's just a small little area of soil, but a sunflower will grow here. It won't be as big, but it will survive. Now the last three are going to be in areas with less sun. Be more shade. And if you come back and check, you'll see that these don't grow as large. They're still worth planting here. Now there's an empty space where the berries haven't yet filled out this trellis. So we're going to put one in this location. Now these are going to be the smallest, but it's the best place to watch the goldfinch come, because up there on the balcony we can sit and have a bird's eye view. While sunflowers are drought tolerant, they do benefit from mulch. Now this week I will water them every day because the roots aren't yet established. Now I also don't direct sow because of the mulch. The seeds will just drown in all of that. Now the seedlings from in the house work much better for me. I normally grow one right here near the rain barrels, but this year I'm saving this area for the moringa. Now I need to protect these from 3 pests. Digging animals, squirrels and skunks. They like that soft soil. So I'm going to use these pieces of hardware cloth and surround the stem on all 4 sides, then secure it with a landscape pin. Then I need to protect it from slugs and pill bugs, and from me with this cage. I tend to accidentally step on my plants, and that cage will help me realize they're there and avoid them. Soon they're going to need support, but they're going to be too small to reach the fence. So I'm going to add this garden stake. I do it now because if I put it off, it just won't happen. Now I'm going to let you guys cool off in the house, and I'm going to finish the rest of these because it is a hot day. Now, what I'm going to do with the rest of these sunflowers, I'm going to give them free to my community. It's a tradition in my alley. People look forward to getting my free sunflowers. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant our bush tomatoes, Ace 55, a low acid variety. Now these seedlings are 3 weeks old. They've already been hardening off for 7 days. Because I grow in such a small space and only 600 square feet here in the front garden and the back garden, I only need 3 plants. Now these are determinate variety, meaning the window of harvest is just a few weeks. And then I'll use them to can sauce and to dehydrate. Now here in the front, it's hot and we get a lot of sun. It's a perfect place for the tomatoes. Spacing's important for tomatoes. You don't want them to spread diseases if they're too close together. They need good airflow. So I want to space them 24 inches apart. And put your rows 48 to 60 inches apart. But of course, I don't have that kind of space. So here in the front, I have the sunflowers, and I'm going to space them 24 inches from the sunflowers, and then 24 inches apart. They'll become 36 inches tall and 18 inches wide. They're not a vining variety, but they will need support. Now I've already made some holes, a few inches deep, because tomatoes like to be buried up to their necks. The first set of leaves, let me show you. Look how deep that is. 6 inches. So they like to be planted all the way up there. Roots are going to grow out of the stems. Now, I feel the best way to feed your tomatoes is with a handful of rich compost into the planting hole. I raise vegetables in a natural organic way, and this soil is rich with organic material. Every year I layer and layer organic matter and build soil. Tomatoes need 1 to 2 inches of water a week, but be careful, try to avoid wetting their leaves. It'll cut down on disease. Wet leaves spread diseases, and mulch is going to help hold in the moisture. Now I do want to protect these from slugs and pill bugs. So before putting the mulch back, sprinkle some Sluggo. I forgot that on the other ones, but birds will peck it all up, so I like to put it under the mulch. It is organic and it won't hurt the birds or the animals. Now I do need to protect these from digging animals too. So I'm going to use some squares of hardware cloth. I'm going to put 4 squares around each stem and secure them with a landscape pin. Now these don't vine, but like I said, they do need support. So I tend to use garden stakes. That's how I support all my plants. And I'm also going to use one of these cages that I made. It's really to help me not accidentally step on the plants. Now, if you're curious what these straws and skewers are for, I put those on there to hold the stems in place. They were flopping over. So what I'm going to do with the last 3, I'm going to save them for the grandkids. They're going to create their own garden. Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our California giant zinnias. These seedlings are 3 weeks old and they've been hardening off for 7 days. Now California giant zinnias will get 24 to 48 inches tall, and they want to be spaced 12 inches apart. So along here, I've already measured 12-inch spacing, but over in between the sunflowers, I'm going to give them 24 inches apart because those sunflowers need more space. Pollinators will love zinnias. They prefer the more open flat flowers with yellow centers. The double petal variety, they're attracted to less. Goldfinch and hummingbirds will visit the zinnias too. Zinnias love full sun. Perfect spot here in the garden. Now I've set up an umbrella because wow, it's 91 degrees. Last week it was in the 30s at night. So I hung it on this bird feeder pole. Now the umbrellas are for me and for filming, but the plants itself, they'll love the sun and the heat. Now I don't plan to feed my zinnias because my soil is already rich in compost. But if you want to feed your zinnias, you can put a slow release fertilizer before planting, or feed them a liquid fertilizer 20-20-20 twice in the growing season. Now you can direct those zinnia seeds after your last frost, but I use a no-dig, a no-till gardening method, and I have very deep mulch, so those seeds would struggle to germinate through that mulch. Taller plants work in my situation much better. I do need to protect these from 3 pests. From digging animals. Here in the heart of the city, it tends to be squirrels and skunks, slugs, pill bugs, etc. And from me. So I'm going to use 4 squares of hardware cloth around the stem, secured with these pins. That'll protect them from the squirrels and skunks. I'll use organic Sluggo to protect from the slugs, pill bugs, etc. And these cages I made, which will prevent me from accidentally bumping and stepping on my plants. That chair's holding the umbrellas now. Now zinnias, they'll get big and they'll branch out, and they do require support. So I've already added a stake. You see it? Here, let me turn you over there. And later I'll tie it up. I can also use it tied to the fence too. Zinnias will bloom all summer long until the first frost, and they are drought tolerant. So the first week, you do want to make sure you water every day. That's until the roots get established. Now, what I'm going to do with the ones that are left? Well, I'm going to give them free to my community. Now, that's not disease. That's from spilled coffee. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our French marigolds. These seedlings, they're 3 weeks old. Now you want to space your marigolds 8 inches apart. That's going to create a beautiful border. Now French marigolds are an intermediate size. They're going to measure about 8 to 12 inches tall. Now marigolds are really fast and easy to grow. They're a great flower for children and new gardeners. Now, if you want to grow in containers, try growing the Signet marigolds. They tend to be more rounded at the top and only 8 inches tall. But if you want really tall marigolds, pick the African marigold variety. They tend to be 3 to 4 feet tall. You can direct sow your marigold seeds after your last frost. But I use a no-dig method of gardening with really deep mulch. So plants work best for me. Now I do move apart the mulch to plant into the soil. Never plant your plants directly into mulch. Marigolds are drought tolerant, but they will benefit from mulch. Now, they don't need staking, but I do need to protect them from 3 things. Digging animals, here, typically squirrels and skunks, and I'm going to use some squares of hardware cloth. I'm going to surround each stem with 4 pieces. Then I'm going to secure them with these landscape pins. And I'm going to use this Sluggo to protect from slugs and pill bugs. It is organic and it won't hurt animals, but birds love it. So I'm going to put it under the mulch. Otherwise, the birds will just peck it all off. And last, I'm going to use this cage to protect the plants from me. I don't want to accidentally step on them. For example, I haven't yet planted my peppers. Hot peppers are going to go between the tomatoes and the marigolds. So when I plant out my hot peppers, I don't want to accidentally back up and step on the marigolds. This will just help me be more aware that the plants are there. It will also give some support. Now, I don't plan to feed my marigolds because my soil is really rich with layers of organic matter I add every year. But if you want to feed your marigolds at time of planting, add a slow release fertilizer. From then on, they don't need to be fed. They are very low feeders. They're easy to grow. Like I said, they're drought tolerant and they don't require deadheading. They will benefit, but it's not required. You can also pinch them back, but these aren't big enough to do that yet. What else? I now remember. They're drought tolerant, but you do want to water every day for the first week because their roots haven't been established yet. Now, what am I going to do with these? I'm going to save 2 for the grandkids, and the rest I'm going to give away to my community. Then I have these here that we're going to put into the green stalk planters in about 2 weeks. Now, marigolds will flower all summer through fall until the first freeze, and they're edible. People add them to salads. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our bronze fennel. Bronze fennel is not a bulbing variety. It's for the leaves and the seeds. Now, I like to grow it with my zinnias to feed the swallowtail butterfly caterpillars. These seedlings are 3.5 weeks old, and they've been hardening off for 7 days. Now here in Zone 7, fennel is a perennial. It'll die back over winter, then grow again in the spring. And it'll get huge, 5 to 6 feet tall and just as wide. Now, my garden's really small, and I don't want this fennel consuming so much space. So every year, I start it fresh and grow it as an annual. It's going to have support here, too, with this bird feeder pole. Now, when the plant gets to be about 8 to 12 inches tall, you can go ahead and start harvesting the leaves. In the summer, when it develops its flower heads, you can harvest those too. All parts of the plant are edible. And in the fall, when the seeds get brown, go ahead and harvest them. They have that Italian sausage taste. Now here in the city, I have to protect them from digging squirrels. So I'm going to use 4 pieces of this hardware cloth. And I'm just going to surround the base of the fennel. and I'll secure it with these landscape pins. I also need to protect the fennel from slugs and pill bugs. Because I use a deep mulch method, they love to hide in those cool, dark, moist places. And last, I need to protect the fennel from me. So I made this from a roll of low fencing. When we moved here, the woman that had been tending this garden for years and years left some of these cages for me. So when I needed more, I just kind of studied it and made some more myself. I still have those old ones, but they're starting to break down. Now, after the roots get established, fennel is drought tolerant, but it will benefit from mulch. Now, if you notice, I put this Sluggo under the leaves because birds love this stuff. Now, it won't hurt the animals, but if I sprinkle it on top of the leaves, the birds will just eat it all away. Now, I am going to water for a week, unless it rains, until these roots get established. Fennel does not require fertilization. Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to plant our lemon cucumbers. They're a small, non-bitter cucumber. These seedlings are only 2 weeks old and they've already hardened off for 7 days. Cucumbers need full sun, and they're going to vine. This specific variety, 3 to 6 feet. So this trellis is going to be perfect, and you want to space your cucumbers 12 inches. But I don't need a full production out of my cucumbers. I only need a few every week for dill salads. So I measured mine 8 inches apart. Now, if you're going to space your rows, you want your rows to be 36 inches apart. Harvest your cucumbers often, and I prefer them small. For this variety, you don't have to wait until they turn yellow. I harvest them green, and they're still delicious. Now I need to protect them from 3 things. Digging animals, and I'm going to use these squares of hardware cloth surrounding the plant, secured with this landscape pin. And second, where is it? Oh, here it is. From slugs and pill bugs. And third, from me. I'm going to surround the plant with this. I tend to accidentally step back on top of my young baby plants. Now the first week, I'm going to water these every day, and after that, they need 1 inch of water each week. Now the lemon cucumbers are more drought resistant than other varieties. Feed your cucumber plants now a slow release fertilizer, then again when they flower. I don't plan to fertilize mine because this garden is full of organic matter from years and years of fall mulching. Now what am I going to do with the ones that are left? I'm going to share those with my community. Lemon cucumbers are perfect in salads and as sliced pickles. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. We're past our last frost and it's time to start hardening off our summer petunias. These plants are 13 weeks old. They were potted up 9 weeks ago. I'm going to start hardening them off slowly, only staying out 2 hours today, then coming back into the kitchen under these lights. Then every day, increase the amount of time they stay outside. I'm going to start them hardening off in this protected area near the house. They'll get less wind, sun, and heat. Then every day, I'll increase their amount of sun exposure, moving them closer and closer to getting full sun. Now, I've pinched these back several times starting 6 weeks ago. I pinch these back because I don't want them to grow tall and spindly and flop over. I want them full and bushy. And in the beginning, I pinched them off right in the middle. You can't see that spot anymore. And then they branched out, and then I pinch off those branches. And most recently, it had lots of blossoms, and I wasn't ready for that. So I pinched those off. Make sure you start hardening them off after your last frost. They're going to harden off 7 to 10 days. Now, after I potted them up, about 4 weeks after, I fed them every 2 weeks with a liquid fertilizer. It's in the garage, but it's Fox Farm, my favorite. Here in the city, I have to protect them from digging squirrels and curious birds. The starlings, the babies are around, and in the front, they've pulled all the leaves off the tomato seedlings and the marigolds, and I don't want them doing that to the petunias here. So we're going to use this netting. Most of these are to be planted into our green stalk planters for our summer flowers. The spring flowers are still growing because we still have cold nights right now. Now these plants are a little bit stressed because they've really outgrew these 4-inch pots about 2 weeks ago. But I was out of soil and I was out of 6-inch pots, but I have some coming tomorrow and I'm going to pot these up. I'm not ready to plant them yet. I'm not ready to pull out those spring flowers. And any that we have left over, we'll put into the front porch pots. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Now we're 2 weeks past our last frost and it's still cold here overnight, but daytime temperatures are warming up and it's time to harden off our vinca, or known as Madagascar periwinkle. These plants are 13 weeks old and they grow very slowly. They were potted up 9 weeks ago. Today, they're going to be outside only for 2 hours, then back in the kitchen under these lights. And every day, we'll increase the amount of time they stay outside. We're going to start them in this protected area here near the house. They'll be protected from the sun and the wind. And then every day we'll expose them to more and more sun. They're going to harden off for 7 to 10 days. Now, they don't need to be pinched back. Vinca are drought and heat tolerant, so be careful, don't overwater. I like that they are pest resistant and don't need to be deadheaded. You know, when you have to remove all the old flowers. Now, a lot of the flowers I grow are edible. We add them to salads, but vinca are not edible. But they will bloom all summer until the first frost. Now 16 of these are going to go into the green stalk planters. And then I forget how many, but most of the rest of them are going to go into a memorial garden. And the ones that are left over, we'll put into the front porch pots. Here in the city, I have to protect them from digging squirrels and curious birds. Now it's nesting time, and birds are pulling tender leaves to add to their nests. And the new baby fledglings, they're curious. They're like toddlers. They don't know what's edible and what's not, and they test everything out with their beaks. Good afternoon, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our yellow summer squash. We have 2 heirloom varieties: early prolific straight neck and early golden crook neck. These plants are 3.5 weeks old, and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. Now they're going to grow to be 3 to 4 feet wide and tall with 2-foot vines. Now I plan to space them 2 feet apart. And if you're going to make rows, you're going to want to space your rows 3 to 4 feet apart. Now, a big problem we have here in north central Maryland are vine borers. And I don't even grow zucchini anymore for that very reason. I only grow these 2 early, very prolific squash varieties. I start the seeds inside to give me a head start to get ahead of the vine borers before they emerge. Now, all squash likes full sun. And you can feed your squash 3 inches of compost in the planting hole at time of planting. Now, I don't plan to feed my squash because the whole garden is full of compost. In the fall, I layer on organic matter. Now, did you see that slug? I just pulled up the other 2 to check, and they didn't have any, but my extra squash plants, I did find more in the pots. And that's why it's important for me to use this organic slug control. It doesn't hurt the animals or the birds. Now here in the heart of the city, this garden is full of wildlife. But I don't want them digging up these plants. Now, they're not really after the plants themselves. They're after the soft soil. It's a tempting place to hide food or hunt for grubs and worms. So I'm going to use squares of hardware cloth to surround the stem from digging animals. Squash doesn't need support, but it's going to fill this entire space. And if I need to water it, I want to avoid watering the leaves, so it helps to know where the stems are. So this stake is going to tell me where to find the stem. Now their biggest pest is me. Like if I'm going to be over here harvesting this broccoli rabe, it's really easy for me to accidentally step back and squash one of these plants. So I'm going to add one of these cages. Now they're going to outgrow these really quickly, but right now, while they're tiny, it's going to protect them from me. For 7 days, I'm going to make sure these are watered well until the roots get established. And after that, they need 1 to 2 inches of water every week. Because squash grows fast and it's mainly water. But again, try to avoid watering the leaves. So I'm going to water and then put the mulch back on to help hold in the moisture. Now what am I going to do with the rest of these? Well, I'm going to give them to my community for free. Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our stevia. Now this stevia, it's 14 weeks old. It grows very slowly. And it's already hardened off for 3 weeks. Stevia, it's a warm weather plant and it likes full sun to partial shade. It's going to become 18 to 30 inches tall and about 18 inches wide. And I have already measured and spaced them 18 inches apart. I'm only going to plant 2. Now if you're going to make rows of stevia, you're going to space your rows. Hang on, let me check my notes. You want your rows to be 30 inches apart. Now I've already pinched these back 8 weeks ago. And it's caused it to branch out. Now the leaves are the sweetest right before they flower. And you can harvest the whole plant or leave a third of the plant to let it grow some more. Don't overfeed your stevia. It'll grow big leaves, but they won't have much sweetness to them. Squirrels, robins, and skunks would love to dig in these holes, so I need to protect them. I'm going to use 4 squares of hardware cloth secured with some landscape pins. Now remember when we were just planting the yellow squash, how there were slugs in the bottom of the pots? I checked and there weren't any in the stevia. Slugs, they don't want to eat the stevia, but I am still going to add some organic slug control because being near the cabbage, I know there's slugs in this area. This stake and this cage are going to help protect these plants from me accidentally stepping on them. Don't overwater your stevia. It can suffer from root rot, especially if you're growing it in a container. Now I'm going to water it today. Make sure any air pockets get worked out, and then it's going to rain this week and water for me. So make sure not to overwater your stevia. Now what am I going to do with the rest of these? Well, I'm going to share them with my community. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our hot peppers now that nighttime temperatures are above 55. Now we're planting them in the front because I want to save the seeds, and I don't want the sweet peppers and the hot peppers to cross. Now I have two varieties, and they're both heirloom. I have red cayenne peppers and early jalapeno peppers. These seedlings are 13 weeks old, and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. Now they're going to grow 2 feet tall and about 1 to 2 feet wide. So you want to space your peppers 18 to 24 inches apart. Now I've already measured and I've dug my holes 18 inches apart for my 5 plants. I've put them between the tomatoes and the marigolds. Now why are these covered? It's because birds are pulling the leaves off of the tomatoes and the marigolds. Hopefully the tomatoes are going to make it. The marigolds will be just fine. Now, if you're planting in rows, you want to space those 24 to 36 inches apart, but I don't have that kind of space here. You can see we're downtown in the city. So I measured, and it's about 32 inches from the tomatoes and about 18 inches from the marigolds. Now this is a very hot spot of the garden, so that's perfect for peppers. They love full sun. Now peppers in general, they're light feeders. I don't plan to feed my peppers. And hot peppers grow so fast, they don't suffer, at least mine don't, from blossom end rot. You know, when the bottom part of the pepper gets soft and then it just kind of rots away, that happens to bigger peppers. Now, you only need a few hot pepper plants because they're very prolific, and you want to harvest them often. These 5 plants, I tend to dry my peppers and make, hot pepper flakes. This is going to last me for a good 2 years. Peppers are like tomatoes. You can plant them deeper and the stems will develop roots. But I'm not going to do that because the deeper you plant the roots, the colder. And peppers like the heat. So I'm just going to plant it level with the top of the pot. I don't think birds are going to pick these, but I do have some hoops and some netting as a backup. So I'm going to keep my eye on them, but squirrels and robins will dig in this area. So I need to surround the stem with some hardware cloth and secure it with landscape pins. And I don't think slugs are going to bother them, but I'm going to go ahead and add some Sluggo. It's going to be good for all these strawberries. It is organic and it won't hurt the animals or the birds. And I'm putting it under the mulch because the birds love this stuff and they'll just peck it all away. Now if you see any holes in the leaves, the weather just got cold again and the plants got stressed out, and I suspect it was white flies that did it, but I'm not sure. But it's warming up and these plants should grow quickly. Bugs, their job is to clean up struggling plants. Now, peppers are going to need support. I tend to use just a simple garden stake. I have a variety of sizes. Later, as it grows, I'll probably secure it with a zip tie. And I'm also going to put a cage around it for support. It also blocks me from accidentally stepping on my plants. Now, we're going to water it in because we don't want any air trapped in the roots. Then for 7 days, we're going to make sure it's watered every day or rained on. Then once the roots are established, you want to water 1 inch a week, but water deep and infrequently. It's better to water deep once than a little bit every day. They don't like their feet wet. Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our eggplant. The variety is Black Beauty. Now these plants are 12 weeks old and they've already hardened off for 11 days. Now you want to space your eggplant 18 to 24 inches apart. If you plant in rows, space those 24 to 36 inches apart. Now these plants are going to grow to be about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. Eggplants are cold sensitive, so wait until your soil is above 60 degrees before planting. It tends to be 2 to 4 weeks after your last frost. Now, Black Beauty has a tender skin, but a tough skin can be caused by cold nights below 60 or hot days above 95. They do prefer full sun. Here in north central Maryland, flea beetles are a problem. So you want to wait until your seedlings get 5 to 8 inches tall before planting, and then they'll be able to survive any flea beetle damage. They like rich soil, so add some compost when you plant. Then 4 to 6 weeks after planting, go ahead and give them a slow release fertilizer. Plant your seedlings level with the soil. Don't plant them really deeply. Now, if you notice, these have gotten root bound. They've really been ready to get into the ground, but we just had a spell of cold, wet weather, and I couldn't film in that. So if your plants are root bound, gently tease apart the roots. And that's going to prevent them from keep growing around and around. It'll help them to spread out into the soil. Now I am going to net these because I don't want the squirrels digging at these onions nearby. So I'm not going to surround them with hardware cloth like I normally do to block the squirrels. But I am going to put on a cage because the onions are starting to bulb up and the leaves are really tall, and I don't want them flopping over on top of the eggplant. Now the cages are going to have to go off later because the fruit will get stuck in that confined space. The eggplant will need some kind of support. As it grows, the soil is really soft and the heavy fruit tends to pull the plant over. Now what am I going to do with the rest of these? Well, I'm going to give them free to my community. Now, eggplant prefer 1 to 2 inches of water every week, but they like deep watering less frequently. So I'm going to water today and make sure they're watered every day for 7 days because the roots aren't yet established. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Nights are now above 50 degrees, so it's time to plant our sweet Italian basil. These seedlings are 4 weeks old and they've been hardening off for 10 days. Now they're going to grow between 18 to 24 inches tall and about 10 inches wide. So I want to space them 12 inches apart. Basil does best planted in full sun. It thrives in temperatures 80 to 90 degrees. I don't plan to feed my basil because my soil is already full of organic matter. Every fall I layer it on. But if you want to feed your basil a general liquid fertilizer, like my favorite, Fox Farm, can be applied every 2 weeks. Now, people tend to plant their basil with their tomatoes, but if you just want rows of basil, you want to space those rows only 12 inches apart, same as the distance you space your plants. It's that simple. Squirrels, robins, and skunks are the biggest diggers in my garden. So I need to protect all my seedlings, and I use hardware cloth. I already had this. I raised quail, and I just used the hardware cloth from their aviary to cut out squares, and I'll surround each plant and secure it with a landscape pin. In the cool weather right now, slugs love to munch down young seedlings. So I use Sluggo. It's organic and it won't harm animals or birds. But the birds do love it and they'll just peck it all away. So I tend to put it down under the mulch. And this cage, that'll protect the basil from me accidentally stepping on them. If I go to check on the raspberries, or if I go back there to check on the cucumbers, I won't accidentally back up and step on these plants. Now, they don't require staking, but pinching back your basil will make a bushier, fuller plant. Let me show you. Now, hang on, those are too small, so it's not time to pinch those back, but I have some other ones. See how tall these are and how thin? But you can see these new leaves developing here. So go ahead and pinch right above that. And it'll bush out. And you can pinch it back several more times as it grows. Now, it's best to harvest your basil before it flowers. I mean, you can harvest it anytime when it's, about 8 inches taller, but always leave a third of the plant. After it flowers, it gets more bitter. So I'm going to take in what I pinched off and store it in water on the counter. If I put it in the refrigerator, it's going to turn brown. Basil wants 1.5 inches of water every week. And for the first 7 days, I am going to water it every day. Now, what am I going to do with all these that are left over? Well, 2 we'll save for the grandkids, and the rest I'm going to give away free to my community. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. The weather has finally warmed up and dried out. We've been having some cold, rainy days. So let's take this opportunity to plant out our okra. Now, okra prefers nighttime temperatures over 65, but here that means I have to wait until June to plant, and I just don't get enough of a harvest if I wait that long. So let's go ahead and plant it out today. These okra plants, they're 12 weeks old, about 3 months, and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. Now, this okra is a mixture of heirloom red burgundy okra and heirloom green Clemson spineless. They're going to grow to be about 4 to 5 feet tall and 24 inches across. So I've measured out my planting holes 24 inches apart, 2 feet. Now, here in north central Maryland, I have picked the warmest, sunniest location in my garden, because our weather here isn't quite as hot as okra prefers. It's used to being grown in the South. Now, I was born and raised in the South, and I love my okra. Because the nights are still cool, I don't direct sow my seeds. I've tried it many times and the plants struggle too much. So these roots are going to be weaker because I started them indoors, and this fence will be a great place to give them some support. Now these plants are really big because, like I said, okra struggles to grow in the cold. And for years, I planted them out small and they just really struggle to grow. So this year I decided I was starting them really early, and wow, do I have some trees. We'll see how this size does after it's transplanted. And if you've noticed, I'm putting back the soil that I dug out of the holes. I saved it and I'm putting it back. And you want to plant them even with the top of the pot. It's going to settle a little bit. I also like big plants because smaller plants will struggle with pests because they're stressed from the cold. But if you see ants on your okra, don't worry. They're just after the nectar in the flowers. They're not going to hurt the plants. Now, fire ants are a different story, but we don't have fire ants here. I don't feed my okra plants. My soil is already rich with organic matter from years of layering on compost. I also raised quail in this area for 4 years. But if you want to feed your okra, at planting time, go and add a handful of compost. But don't overfeed your okra. You're going to get a lot of leaves and not much fruit. Now you can cook the tender young leaves like spinach. Now if you live in the south where it's warm, it's best to direct sow your okra seeds into the soil. You're going to get a much stronger root system that way. I'm basically breaking the rules because okra does not like its roots disturbed. I'm only gently loosening the roots if I feel that it's root bound. If you've also noticed, in the pots, they have this hardware cloth. That's what I tend to use to prevent squirrels from digging up my plants. So while they were hardening off, the squirrels would have dug in these pots. But now they're so big, I'm hoping I don't have to add that out here in the garden. So I'll watch today and tomorrow, and if the squirrels start digging or the skunks have dug overnight, I'll put on some squares of hardware cloth. I'll put 4 squares around the stem. But hopefully I won't have to do that. I'm going to put these cages around to also make it more awkward for the squirrel to get in there and dig. It won't stop them altogether, but it'll slow them down. Because I do a no-till deep mulch system, spring is time for slugs. Now, I think these plants are way too big for slug damage, but it's always a good idea to add some organic slug control. Now, the ground is really wet, but I'm going to go ahead and water it in because I don't want any air pockets trapped around those roots. It'll help the soil to settle. So today and tomorrow it's sunny, but then we're getting back to more rain. Now, once the roots are established, okra is heat and drought tolerant. It needs about 1 inch of water a week. And lastly, I'm going to add some mulch. Now in the fall, I mulched with leaves, but today I'm just going to use some wood mulch. I just bought it from local Walmart or a place like Home Depot. This is going to, I hope, discourage digging animals too. I'm really looking forward to harvesting fresh okra. I can't buy good okra here, fresh or frozen. It's just inedible. And last year's okra that I froze is almost gone. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're gonna plant marigolds into our green stalk planters. This variety is French marigolds, and I grew them from a mixture of my own saved seeds and what was left over in last year's packet. These plants are 6 weeks old. Marigolds grow really fast, and they've already hardened off for a month because it's been so cold and rainy. I couldn't film planting them. So because it was such a delay, I did pot them up again because the cells they were in were too small. Now, I've found that using good-sized plants in my green stock works best for me. I don't direct sow seeds in the pockets. I start the seeds under lights in the basement. And this is what has led to my success with green stalks. Now I have 4 green stalks. And the spring flowers haven't hit their full bloom yet. Because like I said, it's been really wet and cold and rainy. Plus, this side of the house gets very limited sun. Only 2 hours a day and maybe some in the afternoon. So these are really behind the in-ground spring flowers. So I'm going to leave 2 green stalks with the spring flowers, and I'm going to switch out the other 2 for summer flowers. Now I did save those spring flowers and I put them in a container, so we'll see if they survive. So I'm going to plant 4 tiers each with 1 pocket of marigolds. I redesigned my 5-tier planters into 4 levels. That's the size that works best for me. So there's going to be a diagonal of marigolds in each green stalk. Now the marigolds that we planted in the front garden, they're going to get to be about 8 to 12 inches tall and wide. But here in the green stalks, they're not going to get that big because these pockets are smaller and they get less sun. So don't expect a full-size plant in your green stalks. It has its limit, just like any container that you grow in. Expect a smaller plant. Now don't overwater your marigolds. Test the top inch of the soil, and if it's dry, then go ahead and water. Now in-ground marigolds are going to require watering less frequently, and containers dry out quicker, so you're going to have to water more frequently. And if you notice, I don't use the top reservoir because this is on a slope. And it's tilted and it doesn't flow correctly. Plus we have these really tall windows that look down, and I want the top to be beautiful and full of growth. This is what works best for me. I water each pocket. Now the green stalks are a great design, it just doesn't work properly in this space. Now marigolds, they're not heavy feeders, but this container has limited nutrition. This soil is left over from last year, so I will have to feed the marigolds. And I plan to use a general blooming fertilizer from Fox Farm every 2 to 4 weeks, depending. Now deadheading and pruning aren't required, but they will benefit from it. And I do remove the old spent flowers and any brown, dead looking stems. I cut those off. But near fall, I leave a few flowers to develop into seeds. Now, it's hard to find heirloom seeds for marigolds, but the hybrid seeds save well and grow nice, beautiful new plants. I've been doing that for years and years. Now, can you see how the camera sloped? I do turn this a quarter turn every day to give it more equal access to the sun. Now, these flowers are edible. People tend to use them in salads or over prepared dishes, but they can be spicy. Now you want your soil level with the top of each pocket tier. Don't make it down lower because then the plant sets too low and it's down in the shade. I like to alternate greens and flowers in each pocket. And the greens are perennial. So I have strawberries, herbs, and creeping Jenny. And they all come back after winter. Now, if you notice, these strawberries are smaller than the ones that are in the ground because, again, this is a container. And it's not going to be the same size as the one in the garden. You can see the sun is coming. What else? Also, I said I'm going to feed 2 to 4 weeks depending. Well, it's going to depend on the plants that it's sharing with. I need to research how often these strawberries can be fertilized because I didn't put these in here until the summer. We had a drought and some of the strawberries were suffering, so I moved them to the green stalk. Now let's get the last one planted. Squirrels will dig in these green stalks because they want the soft soil to hide their food. And yes, they'll even climb to the top and dig. So I need to protect these plants. And once the roots are established, marigolds are drought tolerant, but they will benefit from mulch. So we're going to water them in well today and every day for a week to make sure those roots don't dry out. Marigolds are also rabbit and deer resistant. That's great if you live in the country, or even here, we have rabbits in the city. They're such an easy flower to grow, and they're good for kids. Petunias and periwinkles are going to be the next 2 videos. But I want to wait until I get some shade back in that area. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant our summer flowers, petunias, into our green stalk planters. Now these plants, they're 15 weeks old and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. For my green stalks, I have the most success with good size, full, bushy plants. Now, because I want big, full plants, I started these seeds early, and I started pinching them back 2 months ago. I did it several times, and I also potted them up twice. I just kept giving them more and more space to grow. Petunias, they prefer full sun. And here between our houses, it's only going to get 2 hours of sunlight every day. So these plants are going to be smaller and less bushy here on the side of the house. Now, as the flowers fade, you want to pinch them off. You want to deadhead them. This is going to encourage the plant to produce more blossoms. Because their work is to set seeds, and you don't want that to happen. And I see where I missed one, so I'm going to pinch off this seed head. Now also, if it gets too leggy, you can go ahead and pinch it back, and it'll branch out more. For the biggest possible plants with the most flowers, I've limited this to 1 plant per pocket. Now I am going to feed the petunias a liquid blooming fertilizer every 2 to 4 weeks, and I plan to use Fox Farm. All containers are going to have limited nutrition, and they're going to run out of nutrition for their flowers. So, especially since this is not new soil. Now, if you buy new potting soil with already having a slow release fertilizer, it's going to tell you how long that fertilizer will last. This is from a year or 2 ago, so I'm going to have to feed these myself. Greenstock does recommend that the soil goes all the way to the top of each tier. Don't have it down below and the plant sitting down. Bees love petunias. On my green stalks, I prefer to plant in a diagonal. So there's a petunia here, and then over one space, and over one pocket, and over one pocket. It makes it have a cascading look. I don't like where I plant the same thing in each pocket of the tier. I like this cascading effect. Now I do need to protect each pocket from digging squirrels. Now, petunias prefer for their soil to stay moist, so don't let them dry out. Now we're going to water them in well to get rid of any air pockets trapped around the roots, and then we're going to add some mulch. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to plant our annual periwinkle into 2 of our green stalk planters. These are going to be for our summer flowers, and we have 3 varieties. All heat wave, but we have blue, apricot, and raspberry. These plants are 15 weeks old. They grow very slowly, and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. So Madagascar periwinkle is also known as vinca. It's a heat-loving, drought-tolerant summer flower. They do prefer full sun, and here between the houses, it's mostly shade. So we're going to see if they continue to bloom. This is the first time growing them for me. Now, old flowers, they're just going to fall off themselves. You don't have to deadhead periwinkles. You want the soil to go all the way to the top of the tier, not set down and recessed, because that's going to give more shade to the plant. You want each tier of the green stalk full of soil all the way to the top. Periwinkle are naturally pest resistant. They're going to flower all summer until the first frost. Now, if you want them to keep blooming all summer long, make sure you feed them. I'm going to use a liquid blossom fertilizer from Fox Farm every 2 to 4 weeks. Now, the flowers themselves, they are not edible. Squirrels love to dig in these green stalks. They'll even climb up them. So I'm going to protect the plants with some hardware cloth. I'm going to water them in now, but as a rule, periwinkle don't like to stay moist. Their roots will rot and their leaves will turn yellow. So try to let them dry out between watering. I am going to add some mulch, mainly to protect any animals from getting their fur caught on this hardware cloth. And if the plants stay too moist, I can always remove the mulch. Now all 4 green stalks are planted. 2, I left the spring flowers because they're still going. And 2, I replaced the spring flowers for summer flowers. So check back for an update. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to plant into our front porch pots balcony mix petunias. Now these plants are 15 weeks old and they've already hardened off for 2 weeks. I wanted big bushy plants, so I started pinching them back 2 months ago, and I've pinched them back several times. I've also potted them up twice. Now the spring flowers, the stock and the snapdragons, we planted those 6 weeks ago, but nesting birds in the area keep plucking off all the leaves. The snapdragons are just little bitty nubs, and the stock has fared a little bit better. But we're going to leave them in the pots and go ahead and add our summer flowers. Now, nighttime temperatures are still in the 50s and 60s, so these spring flowers do have a chance. Most of these pansies we planted in the fall, and some of them 6 weeks ago. And I've kept them going by making sure I deadhead the faded flowers. We're going to leave these again because the nights are still cool. Petunias are going to need deadheading too. It's going to keep them blooming all summer. Petunias love full sun, and they're going to do much better here in the front than on the side of the house. They're going to be bigger and bushier and full of more flowers. This is the warmest, sunniest location in my gardens. The petunias are also going to like these big, deep pots. This is the size that works best for me. Now this is not new soil, so it's already out of nutrition. And I'm going to have to feed these petunias every 2 to 4 weeks. And I plan to use Fox Farm Big Bloom, just following the directions. Just like the spring flowers, I need to protect these from digging squirrels. I have found that big plastic or resin pots hold in moisture best. So we're going to go ahead and water everything in and use some organic slug pellets. And last, we're going to add back the mulch. That'll help hold in the moisture too.
You want some seeds? Yeah?
This is a young squirrel born near the house. And there's 3 of them. And this one's the least scared of me. It's really cute. I just love the wildlife here in the heart of the city. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's time to plant out our sweet peppers. Nighttime temperatures are above 55 degrees. Now this variety is Ivarsky, and they have been grown from my own saved seeds. Now the plants are 13 weeks old and they've already hardened off for 3 weeks. They're going to get to be about 2 feet tall and 2 feet wide. So I'm going to space them 18 inches apart. And if you're planting in rows, they do best spaced 24 to 36 inches apart, 2 to 3 feet. I'm going to plant them between the eggplant and the okra. It's going to be about 2 feet on each side. Now, if you notice those holes in the leaves, it's because the weather turned cold and extremely wet. And this is from slugs, pill bugs, and snails. And they've been hiding in the pots at the base of the roots. So I'm going to put some Sluggo in each hole. I've already checked and removed any of the pests that I found, but if I've overlooked any, I want this under the roots to hopefully kill them off. Let me have one last look here. We're all good. Now it's warmed up again, and that should cause less damage. Now, summer temperatures, slugs don't tend to be a problem, but one of my summer issues is blossom end rot. It's a problem here in all of our gardens. It's caused by a variety of reasons. One big reason is inconsistent watering. Either you water a lot or it rains a lot and then you have a dry spell and it can stress out the plants. Another cause is the soil doesn't have enough calcium. Plant can't get enough calcium, or it doesn't have enough magnesium, which helps it absorb the calcium. So there's a variety of reasons. For me, what has worked is adding Cal Mag. You add it to the water 2 times. When they're setting their first set of blossoms, and then they'll set a second set of blossoms. And I use it both times, and it really seems to help. Now, I don't prune the tops of my peppers. Some people say it causes them to branch out more, and I just really don't find it necessary. Also, your first fruits tend to come from the top, and they tend to be bigger than the second set of fruits. So anyway, I don't prune my peppers. Peppers are light feeders. If you feed your peppers often, it's possible to develop beautiful green leaves and big lush plants and no fruit. I don't plan to feed my peppers. But peppers do need full sun. They really don't like to be in the shade. Because I save my own seeds, I want to separate my hot peppers from my sweet peppers. If they're planted close together, it's possible they can cross-pollinate, meaning next year's sweet peppers could be hot and spicy. So it's always worked for me. For many years, I've put the sweet peppers here in the back and the hot peppers in the front. Now here in the city, squirrels, skunks, and robins can't resist the soft, new, freshly dug soil, and they'll dig and kill the plants. So I need to protect them with 4 pieces of hardware cloth around the stem, secured with a landscape pin. I also add a cage around the pepper plants. It's more to protect them from me walking and accidentally stepping on them. Like, for example, this is a small space. There's only 2 feet between them and the okra. And during this planting, because there's a cage there, it's prevented me from accidentally crushing that okra plant. But if the fruit grows up against that cage, I can always remove it. Now, the peppers will need support, and I found that the heavy branches will break from the fruit, so I tend to just use a garden stake. See, they're back over there. Sometimes I add more than one and just secure it with a zip tie. Now, peppers want an inch of water every week, but if I'm watering or it's raining and it deeply waters them, they like that better than a little bit every day. They'd rather have deep watering less frequently. Now today we're going to add the cow mag. So it needs 1 teaspoon per gallon. And this watering can is 1.5 gallons. So I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of the cow mag. And it's really hot and sunny right now, and these plants aren't used to it because it's been so cold and cloudy. So I'm not going to use the watering can with the sprayer, because if the leaves get wet, the water droplets can act as magnifying glasses and burn the leaves. So I'm going to be careful today only to water the base of the peppers. And the last thing we're going to do is add some new mulch. It's going to help hold in the moisture. It's just basic mulch from Home Depot. Now what am I going to do with these peppers that are left? Well, I'm going to share these with my community. Now that area where I planted the peppers had fall vegetables. So the cardboard I put down in the fall had holes cut in it for those vegetables. So the squirrels and the skunk have really been digging in that area. So I brought in some new mulch. The fall leaves have basically just been scattered. This is my favorite vegetable to grow, sweet peppers. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.